Welcome to Bold Influence with Lyna Live. Thank you for joining us. I see there's already a crowd. That's amazing. Thank you to our viewers from Facebook, from YouTube, from Kenyan Report, from my Facebook page, all the Kenyan groups, all the African groups. I hope you can share in your networks. I am excited tonight to have you here, that despite the fact that we are trying to breathe from Corona, trying to breathe from with George Floyd. It's crazy tonight, but you know what? We thank God we're here. I give God the glory that we are able to breathe and share and address the issues, because we need to do that. Having said that, again, I'm Lyna. I have an exciting guest tonight, and I know everybody's waiting for her, but I want to share a couple of things with you real quick before she comes on. I like to say that I don't know who came up with the idea that as Black professionals, we should not speak out about things because of what we are going through. And sometimes it feels like you have to leave everything in the parking lot or in the parking ramps before you go to work, because your neck is squeezed either way. You might have just witnessed the death of a Black man, but you are supposed to hold your breath and you're not supposed to talk about it. I don't know who thought that's professionalism, because clearly that's a subtle way of having your neck squeezed. Having said that, when there were no cameras, Black professionals were dismissed, and we were kind of charged and told that, hey, why would you bring that up? Maybe you're just using it as a playing the race card in your place of work. And sometimes you're accused of supporting hate groups when you try to bring up something. And I want to share that I'm grateful for the cameras. I'm grateful for the recordings that are available now, because then the question is, it's no longer a conspiracy or playing the race card. There is racism. And like I shared the other day on my Facebook, racism is not dead. It's just not hiding anymore. So we must address it. We must talk about it. That's something that I'm going to do another time. But for many, 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 many months, many, many, many years, lifetimes, over 400 years, Black people have had their necks squeezed. They've been suffocating for many reasons. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Dean. All of you for joining us. If I can just share why we're here today, is because as an immigrant, it is because of these structure or systems globally that that caused or resulted in Lyna being in the United States. I want to say that I am grateful for opportunities like this. Oh my God, all of you, thank you, Australia, thank you, Kenya, for coming to watch us. And if we can just breathe, and if those who are asking what can you do, I'm going to come up with a different live to address that, because we don't have a lot of time with a congresswoman who's going to be joining us. But you can protest. You can protest if there's a way that you can address structural racism. And if you want to know what that is, hopefully you used Blackout Tuesday to educate yourself, to inform yourself, to truly see whether this is a fallacy, conspiracy, or real. And so you can protest, you can organize, you can counsel, you can educate, you can inform, you can use your platforms to share information, you can donate to different groups and funds that are doing great things out there, legal funds. You can bail out low-income people if you feel obligated to do that. But more importantly, we need you to survive, because we need you in November to vote. We need you in the primaries in August, because local politics makes all the difference. And as I said, the most important thing right now is we need you to breathe so you can be okay. So take time to breathe and not be guilty, because there's always a place that you can effect change. Having said that, we want to grow, and we want our children to grow to become better than us, because they are seeing what we are doing. So without further ado, I am going to acknowledge everybody that has joined us, invite other people, and then go and bring in our beautiful Congresswoman. Those who saw the picture when I shared the other day when she was championing the housing bill, and I said powerhouse, and you guys were all loving on her. Tonight, welcome and join the show as I invite the beautiful Representative Ilhan Omar from the Minnesota 5th District. It's my pleasure and my honor to have you tonight so you can speak to the world. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Lyna.
You are very welcome. So, without further ado, I imagine you're also trying to breathe. You're trying to get through Corona. You're trying to breathe with the family of George Floyd. What do you have to say about what's happening in our town, right in our backyard?
Oh, this is a very dynamic time. Truly, I don't think any one of us have really experienced a time like this where we are dealing with the pandemic of the public health crisis we're looking at, and then now dealing with the pandemic of racism as we watched a community member get the life choked out of him by a police officer in Minneapolis. But as you alluded to with my housing bill, we've also been dealing with an economic crisis. Um, and so, I feel heartbroken. I feel sad. We all are keeping our hearts open and sending our condolences to the family of George Floyd, to his community, to anyone who knew him. But we are all collectively also mourning this loss, and it's a reminder, as you said earlier, that this happens, and has been happening. Now we only get to see it on tape, and from the days of enslavement to lynching to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to now police brutality, the Black community in this country has been brutalized. And those of us who are African immigrants, who have the privilege of growing up in a space where our Blackness was celebrated and dignified, and humane. We now live in a space where, regardless of what your ethnicity is, the system sees you as a Black person. And so, even though my ethnicity is Somali, I am every day in space as a Black woman, and my son is a Black, youth growing up here, and so is my eldest daughter, and the kind of solidarity that people talk about isn't just a solidarity for us; it's a lived experience as well. And many of us are also deal with the trifecta of hate and the intersectionality of that hate as immigrants, right? As people who oftentimes have to deal not only with the anti-Black policies and rhetoric, but we also deal with the anti-immigrant policies and rhetoric. And those of us who are also Muslim in this country deal with the anti-Muslim rhetoric and policies. And so there's a lot of pain that we hold in dealing with the trifecta of that hate. And as we navigate a time where we're dealing with a public health crisis, with a virus that doesn't really discriminate against the lines of ethnicity and race and gender. We are dealing with the social and economic neglect that often exacerbates the kind of issues that come from this kind of pandemic. And that's why you're seeing more people in the Black community be impacted by COVID-19, because our communities are already dealing with many of the pre-existing conditions that make the case worse. here in Minneapolis, we have one of the highest asthma rates within the community is over in North Minneapolis. We are dealing with extreme racial disparities when it comes to housing and employment. And so all of those things are impacting and expediting the way in which COVID-19 impacts us. Are you still here? I can't see you anymore.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Lyna?
Okay, there we go. I am so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, now you have a black thing covering. Yep, there.
Okay. Sorry. Now that's a serious glitch. I'm sorry, and I apologize to our viewers about that. I think my camera unplugged a little bit. But like the Congresswoman was speaking, I hope you guys are listening. She's describing all the systemic issues and the issues that are affecting our day to day, from how the corona showed and highlighted the economic issues that we're having, from housing to all of that. And really, before this conversation started of you and I, to come on live, George Floyd hadn't been killed. We were talking about the effects of corona on the African immigrant community, whether it's in the United States or Minnesota. But speaking on where we live, which is Minnesota, I live in the northwest suburbs next to St. Therese and Northridge, where a lot of those homes have been affected. And just to quote a few numbers for you, the Minnesota Commissioner Jan Malcolm had cited that a lot of healthcare workers, 1,300, this was like weeks ago when I spoke with you, had been affected. However, she went on to describe that majority of the Black congregate care workforce was mainly African immigrants. I want to just highlight something for you, and maybe you can help us out. A lot of us as African immigrants are busy working. Sometimes they work two jobs because they have to make ends meet. And as an African immigrant, I may not describe this for you, but for the sake of our viewers, most of us have families both here in the United States and both somewhere else, whether it's Africa or where the refugees settled. We do support more than one family. So we are mandated because of the income wage that we are getting to work more than one job. So sometimes they're working in two nursing homes. And also at the same token, then when they don't feel well, in the last month, there was a lot of reports where workers were forced to report to work even when they don't feel good and they don't know where to go. And I think that's when I reached out and I was like, okay, what can the congressman speak on that, on the abuse of immigrants, and also the fact that they must work two jobs? And then you wonder why we are dying. 3 immigrants right here in Minneapolis are dead as of today from COVID-19.
Yes, I mean, you speak to a problem really that we've seen here in Minnesota and across the nation. There have been 4,300 complaints that have been filed with OSHA regarding unsafe environment and unfair retaliation. But as you know, OSHA has only conducted 36 investigations or inspections in those complaints. That comes up to fewer than 1%. So I sit on the Education and Labor Committee, and I sit on the subcommittee of the Workforce Protection. And so my colleagues and I have been fighting to strengthen the OSHA non-retaliation clause. We have been pushing them to really utilize all the resources that they have in responding to some of these complaints. Because think about this. Healthcare workers, whether they are in nursing homes, whether they are in clinics, whether they are in our hospitals, These are the people who are, right, like essential workers, frontline workers. They are working day and night to protect us and to make sure that we are healthy. And to think that they themselves not only have PPE, not only have, you know, paid sick and protections that they need at work if they themselves are feeling ill, but don't have the support and the mechanism that allows them to feel like they have a say in protecting one another as they protect the public, is really dangerous, disheartening, and unacceptable, right? It's unconscionable for us to think that that's taking place. And so we have not only worked within Congress to author letters and policy in a couple of the packages that we passed, but we're also individually working with the institutions, the healthcare institutions, to say you have to step up in protecting the workforce, because you're not going to be able to be in place to respond if you don't have people who are healthy enough to take care of the people that are coming in that are vulnerable in our communities. And this is really the piece, right, in which many folks don't understand, is that many of the essential workers and healthcare providers in our communities are also vulnerable members of our communities. They might have, they might be immigrants, whether they are documented or not. They might not have a status in which they feel comfortable enough to challenge the institutions they work for. And you know, the recognition that these people who every single day selflessly are showing up to serve, and not feeling like they are a valued member that deserves protection and care and humanization is really disheartening, right? I remember when we were talking about the DED, the deferred status that many of our community members, right, our
Liberian
brothers and sisters in the Liberian community, our siblings there, you know, I went and visited a nursing home, which the majority of the people who were working there were a recipient. And, you know, we were there a few days before it expired, which meant that the majority of the workforce in that nursing home was not going to show up, which meant that that nursing home was not only going to be understaffed, but probably not staffed at all. Right. And so we are risking the lives of the people who are vulnerable, who need the service, because we've risked the lives of the people who would serve them by making them vulnerable, right? And so that circle, that understanding that we are all interlinked, we all make our community work, we keep the lights on, that every single human in our community is valuable because they are providing a service that is essential to all of us, is an important piece of this conversation, and one that has been laid bare really because of COVID-19. You know, many people have disregarded the people who work at our grocery stores, who pack, you know, the trucks that deliver our food, the people who are picking up our trash, the people who essentially, you know, are working at our hospitals and clinics and nursing homes, who might not be the doctors, right?
Right.
We hold at a high regard. Right. And now we're finally understanding that every single member of our community that does keeps the light on is actually an important and valuable member, not only of the workforce, but of our community. Right. And that recognition has made us push for legislation to protect them, but also to recognizing that they need things like hazard pay, because they are risking their lives.
Mhm.
That we need to guarantee paid sick and save time,
Mhm.
because they are human, right?
Yes.
And they deserve to be protected as they protect others.
Mhm.
And supporting them because they are also families that they've got childcare costs and other essential costs. In order for them to be able to do their job, they need us to support them. And so those pieces have been part of the legislation that we passed in the HEROES Act. We've also, in recognition that here in Minnesota, we have 140,000 members of our community who live in mixed status families, which many people like you and I understand what that means clearly, because we've lived those lives.
Mhm.
To many, those are the invisible members of our communities. People don't understand how somebody can be married to someone and not have a full status, right?
Mhm.
And they don't understand how complicated and broken our immigration system is,
Mhm.
and how important when we think about caring for our families and giving taxpayers their money back,
Mhm.
because these people have paid taxes, that it's important for us to protect them regardless of what their status is, and to care for them, and give them the money back that they've already paid into the system. So I introduced the legislation to recoup that money for them, so that they can get the stimulus checks that's owed to them, like every other taxpayer that we have in our country. And that passed in the HEROES Act, and hopefully once it becomes the law of the land, the people will be able to get the relief they need.
And I love that how you say that. And there's it's nice to know that there's actually someone advocating for immigrants, because sometimes it gets very lonely. It's a kind of uncharted territories for a lot of people. And I know you don't have a lot of time because you got plenty of things to do out there. But just to stay on track, maybe two last pieces to work on. A lot of essential workers that you mentioned, a lot of healthcare workers, whether they are doctors, nurses, CNAs, lab people, there's always this question of like, yes, we are fighting corona together, and everybody says we're in this pandemic together, but I say we are in the same pandemic but differently. By that I mean there's a lot of people that did not qualify for the stimulus check that was passed out because they were not in the correct status that you guys call it. And then there's a lot of them that still are working and don't have the right authorization. So my ask of you is like, how can you champion work authorization for these workers, like you call hazard pay or the stimulus, but kind of, if they're fighting this disease together, why can they be naturalized, or not really naturalized, but given kind of like DED, so that they can work? What can we do about that? And you can share that quickly, and then we can.
Yeah, I mean that's an important piece, right? And the fortune of um, being in Congress in this moment has been that I do have a unique lens that many people don't have or are not used to having in Congress. I don't just speak on behalf of my constituents in the stories that I hear and advocate for them, but many of these stories make sense to me because I have a lived experience and I understand the nuances of what we need to do and where we need to have a 360 lens in trying to deal with the problem. And so our office has um, really served not only the district but the state on immigration issues, because we have a particular expertise and understanding. And so people just feel comfortable in coming to our office and seeking those services. And so we've been working really hard to expedite some of that work authorization for folks, and really taking the administration to task in saying, we are faced with a pandemic. These are valuable members of our community. Can you do A, B, and C? Why can't you fulfill this? And we've had lots of success. And so I will say to your viewers, and to anyone who might watch this later, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We are in full operation. Even though we are all working from home, our caseworkers who deal with immigration and workforce issues work around the clock in trying to expedite and get answers for things that might have been stalled or blocked otherwise.
I love it. And I think just to kind of sum it up, or it's nice to give a shout out to all our viewers from all over, tagging yourselves. And as usual, we see you, we feel you. I might not acknowledge each one of you, but as you know, I kind of claim Representative Omar as my baby sister because she grew up a little bit in Kenya, even though she's a Somali sister. But at the end of the day, we are the same human race, Black women in America, trying to create change in our spaces. So, having said that,
sisters from the Horn, you know, essentially on the same block.
So then I want to say to you, what would you like to share as your last words? Because I can see the time and I know that you're required to be somewhere else. But before you go, we've talked about your housing bill. We've talked about the work authorization. You're going to keep pushing and fighting for us. And then when we hear Trump say that we are rapist criminals and useless people, and you're out there, we see you, we feel you, we are sending you positive energy. And what can you say in a time like now when you see the leadership of this country and people fighting for something out there? And I want to say to you what I said today, which was, as people start looking at how people are protesting and ask what they're protesting about or why. What are your words there? Then I'll let you finish with your book.
That's a really good question, right? Like we are often focused in the policing of what is taking place. And use that as a tactic to really dismiss the core of what the problem is. We've all seen that. You know, you're too angry. You don't use the proper words. All of that, and that is creates the path to sort of dismissing it. And to us, it's about speaking truth, and it's about really not sugarcoating anything and just laying everything bare so that we can get the urgent response that the issues that we talk about need. And for me, I, like you said, I was born in Somalia, sheltered in Kenya, and nurtured here in the United States, and I now get the opportunity to serve. And what I do know is that there is a complacency that develops when we are too focused in the way in which people address issues, and we are not focusing on the issues that need to be addressed. And so right now, as we deal with police brutality, as we deal with the social and economic neglect, as we deal with a public health crisis that really is urgently reminding us that we need things like Medicare for all, and we need to have a very broad social justice movement that allows us to be housed, that allows us to have a dignified workplace, that allows us to have health care. We also recognize that there is an underlying problem, which is racism in this country, and unless we acknowledge that, we are not ever going to find ourselves where we can cohesively address many of these issues. And so, as I've introduced the legislation to deal with the pandemic, as I've introduced legislation to deal with the economic crisis, I'm now introducing legislation to deal with the police brutality and the social and economic neglect that exists in our community, and legislation to help us rebuild places like Lake Street and North Minneapolis. It's going to be vitally important that we don't lose sight of this moment, and we don't really get complacent as the noise gets less and less, because this is one in a lifetime opportunity for us to ask for real bold changes that are going to be lasting change, impactful change, and meaningful change. And so, as the '68 riots taught us, and as the Great Depression taught us, and as the 1918 pandemic taught us, there are proposals that come out of those challenges. There's always an opportunity that is presented to you when there's a challenge. And now, because all of those three things are happening at the same time, we have to make sure that this opportunity gives way to sweeping reforms that allow for us to be fully equalized in our country, and have the fruits of this great constitution that we have, and this dream that everybody who's an immigrant knows exists in the United States. We just need to make sure it exists for everyone else.
And I love how you say that, because you're so good at it, and I think that's what politicians do. But I wanted to share that I'm so grateful that you're here, and it's nice to use this opportunity not to say that you don't like Representative Omar or you don't like Lyna, but this is an opportunity to say, what is it? How did we get here? How did we truly get here? Why are we here? What can we do while we're here? And on that note, when we started speaking, the representative had not released a book. She didn't even her team did not even mention there was a book out there. But I am excited, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that she has a new book, and it is called "This Is What America Looks Like." And I believe she speaks for a lot of us, and to a lot of us. For me, I've not read the book. I'm not going to read the book until she sends me my signed, autographed, personal copy. But having said that, what are your last thoughts to the world? Why is it important to vote? Please don't forget that. And the census.
Yeah. I mean, so being counted in the census allows for us to have the proper resources in our community that we need for housing and all of the essential needs that our community has. And it gives us the tools to be in position to elect the people who will represent us in Congress, and have an equal voice. For me, what I see is a place and a space in which the people who have created the policies that are really systematically rooted in racism, and rooted in the lack of equalization for all of us, the systems that allow for certain people to benefit and for others to not, have had clarity, right? They've been strategic. They've had they've had a mission. And so this is our time to be clear, strategic, and systematic in the ways in which we mobilize and organize ourselves, our way to the ballot box. Because knowing that you count in the census, one, lets people know how many of you are in a particular place. We Africans oftentimes will talk about, there's 30,000 of us, 40,000 of us, 100,000 of us in Minnesota. If you don't participate in the census, we can't have that be actualized, and we can't use that number to push for policy, right? And resources. And so being counted allows for us to use that number in providing for our communities. And in that same breath, when people know how many members within a ward, within a city, within a congressional district are coming out to vote. And that is power. Right? Minnesota's 5th district used to have one of the lowest numbers in voting. And we've been able to turn that around over the years. I got elected to Congress with as the highest vote-getting freshman in this elections in the last election cycle, and the seventh highest vote getter in the whole of Congress in the House elections, and that gives you, right, an understanding of the kind of mandate you have when you're speaking to issues. And so we want all of our people counted in the census, but we also want all of our voices counted in the ballot box. Mm-hmm. And so I urge people to not really focus on on the personalities and who's mobilizing who and all of the things that happen in our communities, but to focus on the task at hand. And that task is to make sure that we are using every resource we have, whether it is our financial resources, whether it is our manpower, whether it is our voice, to push for the changes that we need.
I love that. And I think it's important to remember that, yes, we need our voices counted in the ballot boxes, like you said, because that's where it makes a difference. Right. We need people that are going in and actually dismantling and disrupting the systemic racism that, like you said, policies that are outdated, and that we need new policies to make a difference. Once again, I love that you joined us, and I want you to share a little bit about your book, because I see someone asking, I can't wait to hear about the book. Yes, Valentine, take your frustration to the ballot boxes. And Mace, I see you vote, vote, vote. That is pretty good. And civic education is important. So what is your last, I call it leadership nuggets or your wisdom nuggets? Say a little bit about your book. And then I think also just to share your words of comfort for the people out there that are on the streets, and also the family of George Floyd.
Yeah. So my book is an intimate portrait of my journey from refugee to Congress. It gives the kind of civic engagement that Rose is talking about. It tells people how I started at the age of 14, taking my grandfather to caucuses, and how that inspired me to be involved in our democracy and to recognize the power of my voice and the voice of my community. And it talks about being a mother at a young age, the trials and tribulations you go through when you're a half generation, because I came to the United States at 12. I had my identity sort of formulated in Africa, and then had to reckon with the development of being a teenager and a young adult here in the United States, and the process in which I first ran against the 44-year incumbent when I was in the Minnesota House, and how I decided to run for Congress and put that campaign together. I think when we allow people to formulate our narratives, we give them power over us. Mm-hmm. Many of our stories, our struggles, our hopes, our pride, our aspirations are not inked in paper, not only in this country, but around the world. And we are dynamic in the way we are raised. We are dynamic in the way we see ourselves, and we are dynamic in the way in which we lead. And I wanted to have that story be out there, because I know when I go speak to young people, the first question they ask me is, how did you get here?
Yeah.
It's the question your daughter asked me, right?
My daughter asks you that all the time. Yeah.
Because we are, for the first time, I am the first African-born to ever serve in Congress.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
So we're in 2020, and for the first time we're seeing someone who looks like us, who's walked our path, who was raised by a mother and a father like ours, be in Congress. And it's you want to absorb that story, you want to hear it, you want to use it as an inspiration. And I can't travel the world, and I can't be in everybody's living room, and I can't answer every little girl's questions about how I got here. But I could put it in a book, and I could allow for them to read it from me instead of reading articles that are often written with a particular narrative in mind. And I think that really is the story of Africans. Other people have written about us. We don't write about ourselves. And it's time for us to own our narratives, to own our failures, our successes, our trials and tribulations. I am here because of God. I'm here because people believed in me. I'm here because I found a home in this great country. But I am here because of hard work as well. And all of that really gets to be on those pages in ways that other people wouldn't be able to tell that story. So it's a very vulnerable book. I'm quite private person.
Is it on Amazon? Someone is asking, is it on Amazon?
Yes, it is. It is. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere, I think, where books can be found. There's an audio as well. But it's a very privately written book. It was quite painful to write it, because I am, if anyone who knows me knows I don't really like talking about myself. But I got tired of people telling my story that I didn't really think spoke to who I am as a person, how I see myself. And I encourage people to be in that process of owning their narratives, of telling our stories, of talking about who we are, where we come from, what drives us, what is inside of us. As we talk about the dehumanization of Black people here, it is, it's to recognize the when you are not telling your narratives, others will, and they will put their idea of you to the world. And it's important to put our ideas of ourselves to the world. And I think, that's what I will leave with people. Take care of yourself, take care of your families. I know we are all grieving. This is a very challenging time. Not only are we quarantined, but we're also dealing with the economic anxiety of the economic crisis that we're all faced with. We're dealing with, the unearthing of many challenges we live in this country and around the world as Black people. And it's going to be important for us to care for ourselves, so that we can care for our families, we can care for our communities, and we can care for those around us. And again, to never really be afraid to be yourself, to tell your story, and to be as bold as you can. People might not really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But if you are passionate and purposeful, people will respect it ultimately.
And I want you to just finish that. It's very beautiful how you said it. Own your story, tell it. Otherwise, somebody else is going to be putting their idea of what they think of you there. But having said that, there's always this piece that I want you to really crown. We voted you to Congress from Minnesota, or some of us did, not all of us. But as Africans and African Americans, there's always this thing about trying to divide people. But I want you to create that unifying voice to remind people that we are out there as protests. So everybody's crying about the dehumanization of Black people as a human race, whether you're Black, white, or whatever. But I want you to connect that piece of the Africans and African Americans and as a Black human race.
Yeah, I think it all begins with an understanding, right? The lived experience of African Americans in this country is one that none of us as African immigrants could ever fully comprehend. We don't have the historic trauma and the systematic challenges that many of our brothers and sisters in the African Americans faced with for so many years. For us, this is a newer experience, a decade or so old, right? And so we first have to hold that truth. We have to know that whatever pain we're feeling, it's never as equal to
As their
anything that they have dealt with for over 400 years. And so that's where that understanding first needs to happen. And when you are talking about systematic barriers that exist in this country, centering their voice and their experience as you ground the conversation is really an important piece. What I hear often from African Americans when we talk about the Black community dynamic is that they know that we don't face the same challenges, and so to them it's like, well, you take up too much space, and so creating that space is the thing that we need to do and center those voices. I've seen so many young people who are Somali and Oromo and Ethiopian, Kenyans, Cameroonians, Senegalese out cleaning up and protesting in Minneapolis, and they all remind us that ethnically we might not be African American, right? We all Somali, Kenyan, whatever, but to the world visibly, we are Black. And so yes, that experience we share. But the experience that comes from a generational and systematic oppression isn't one we all share. And so recognizing that and holding that and knowing that, where we don't have the weight, we lift it from our brothers and sisters. And when we are feeling the weight, when we are dealing with, our immigration issues and our status issues, and we're dealing with, all of the other things that we deal with here as African immigrants, it's their place, right, to also hold that weight for us. And so as a unified force, we are strong in that when we lift each other up. I talk a lot about the women I have the honor of serving with in Congress. We use something called shine theory. We allow each other's voices to expand and excel, because we know that today I might not be able to do this, so my sister is going to lead and I'm going to follow, right? And tomorrow it's my time, and this is something I feel passionate about, and so they're going to do the same thing. And so recognizing that our African American brothers and sisters and us can do that for one another. When there is an economic investment that needs to happen with small business and all of that, there's an entrepreneurial spirit that African immigrants have, and a history that we bring from our countries in the way that we invest in one another. And so that is, something that we can utilize and build bridges and help in that gap. And so there is a place for everyone in our community to help one another achieve the American dream and count on one another to survive in this moment in time.
I love it. And I know that in every crowd, as you can imagine, we almost have 200 people and you gotta go. I wanna thank them all for giving us their time, because that's an honor. But I wanna thank you for your time. It's a gift, and I know you gotta run. However, thank you. We wish you the best, and remind people that your voices have to be heard at the ballot boxes. There's a lot of people that love you. There's a lot of people that are sending you prayers. There's a lot of people that are holding you up. We just want to send you to that battleground. You do your thing. We got you. But thank you again. If you need anything, we're here for you. We will take you again. And anytime, you're welcome to Bold Influence. Come influence people. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined from across the world. And to Lillian, yes, let's mobilize the immigrants to vote. This is our time. Thank you.
Yes. Bye. Thank you everyone for watching. That was amazing. Lillian, everybody, Apondi, Mercy, Camille, Shiro, Missy, we see you. We thank you. Again, there's a lot of love here. I'm not going to acknowledge any hateful text. So if you joined, you may as well leave. But for everybody who's come, acknowledging each other's strengths and weaknesses is absolutely necessary. Like the Congresswoman said, there's space for all of us. Do your part, go protest. There's activism, go teach, go educate, go donate, go support. But at the end of the day, make sure you register to vote, because the differences are going to be made by those in office, those in the off places of influence where the change is much needed. Make sure that you're making those people uncomfortable the same way they've been making other people uncomfortable. But the only way you do that is through your vote. So my heart goes out to all of you. Stay healthy, stay safe, try to breathe because we need each other. Thank you for watching.